You hear that? That's the beautiful sound of birdsong. Feels good to be recording this again in the great outdoors. It's kind of bittersweet, though. There's around 6 chapters of this story left. 8, if I'm counting the 2 epilogues that I don't know if I'm going to do. And, 30, there is around 10 more chapters left. Of course, counting the side stories, or 9. Well, Side Story 2 will be recorded. Side Story 2 has already been recorded and will be uploaded before this chapter. Because chapter 21 right here is Journey's End. Plucky's been reunited with his friends and mate. He's found out that Scarlet is going to be having cubs with him. Scarlet, in turn, helped him with his feelings over his father, along with Robber. And it looks like, well, this might be a short chapter. So, without further ado, let's read. When the morning came, the storm had passed, though the rain still remained. It was only a light shower, but it was still frequent and persistent. It was dull outside. The sky was pasted with a light gray overcast, and the ground around was completely saturated with water. Some areas of the town were flooded. Robber woke up as soon as it was light. He lightly nudged Plucky awake to tell him he would be on his way. Plucky thanked him one last time, and both bade each other a warm farewell, before the coal-black feathered crow took off into the overcast sky, heading towards White Deer Park. Plucky watched the direction he went to be sure he and the rest of the group would head the right way when they departed later that night. Once darkness fell again, Plucky, Scarlet, Dash, Bolt, Perry, Woody, and Jester all set off on the last leg of their long journey. The rain had stopped now, but the sky was still overcast. The humans had their power back, and the orange street lamps were back on as the group wandered through the night-engulfed town. The ground was still wet beneath their feet, and eerily the orange flush from the street lamps reflected off the immense puddles that had formed in the road gutters. Hold on. I was just checking to see if my mobile data was still on, which luckily it isn't. That would be a bit of a mistake if I left it on. And a bee was buzzing in my ear. In fact, it's still buzzing right in front of me. Get away from me, bee! I'm trying to record a video. Bee! Stop! Hey! What did I ever do to you? Bee! In one part of the town before reaching the fringe of the country, they had to swim across a flooded section of a road. It was easy enough. The town was so devoid of human activity during the night, it might as well have been abandoned. Sorry about that, guys. Apparently, the bees wanted to play with me while I was recording. They soon found their way out of the town and back in the open country. Hopefully now, that was to be the last time they would ever be in an urban environment. During the first night, they crossed the surrounding farmland, but at times their pace was very slow. The ground in the country was indeed waterlogged. At points, they had to make detours around some fields where the ground was so saturated it was basically a mud pit. Trundling through the mud quickly tired them all out, so they commonly stopped to rest whenever they found the slightest excuse for a shelter. Initially, they were only going to travel at night, but at times it was so dark and the conditions poor that it would be too dangerous to venture the land. At times, they had to continue the journey in the gloomy daylight. Fortunately for them, there were no humans about. Clearly, they were taking refuge in their homes, not wanting to defy the weather. The poor conditions really put a setback on the expected time till Journey's End, although that had already been extended since the group had been separated. Nice title drop there. Dang TV tropes. Perry was now managing to fly continuously on his previously injured wing, but only for a short time before it caused too much strain. When he wasn't flying, Plucky and Scarlet took it in turns to carry him. The others had told Plucky of how he suffered his injury at the hands of Scarlet's older brother, and Plucky thanked him for his bravery. Scarlet had also told Plucky of her other brother's sacrifice for her, a time when he had to comfort her. Plucky had also told them all of how he escaped the Grey Foxes, running the airport runway, climbing through the electric fence, and crossing the motorway. And the time he was all on his own. The sharing of these stories soon passed a time when they were forced to stop by the weather deciding to batter the land with rain again. During one of their conversations, Scarlet accidentally let slip that she was carrying cubs. Naturally, the ones who didn't know were shocked, but they also gave Scarlet and Plucky their congratulations. It all became clear to them that they had to get to White Deer Park as soon as possible for the Vixen, and the unborn cubs' sakes. Unlike with Bold, however, Plucky isn't alone in helping Scarlet. He's got 5 other friends. One of them who is his best friend, and 4 others who were loyal to the very end. However, no matter the importance of reaching Journey's end, the wet weather persisted. At one point it rained constantly for 2 days. It was the definition of miserable. The days were dark and gloomy even at midday, while Mother Nature continued unmercifully to pelt the group with daggers of rain. One final trial from the environment. But it's all worth it because they're all almost home. They were currently venturing across some wild scrubland, though it was recently flooded and had been turned into a bog of thick, deep mud. With each step, their paws sank deep into the soft, sticky sludge, their fur quickly becoming crusted with it. Each of those steps was perilous for all of them, but the 2 foxes had to push the pace, Scarlet in particular. Her maternal instinct was getting the better of her, thinking only for the sake of the cub she was carrying, her face showing a mixed look of anxiety and determination. Unlike her, Plucky was considering the safety of everyone. Perry was thankful to be able to fly okay now, but was finding it difficult in the pouring rain. It looks like Perry the Peregrine is back, guys. Dash, Bolt, Woody, and Jester were lagging behind in the deep mud. Scarlet, we need to ease off for the sake of the others. This mud is treacherous, Plucky reasoned with her. Scarlet looked back to the others. I know. I'm sorry. I'm just getting anxious, she stuttered. It's only natural, I know, Plucky sympathized. But I think we should stop until at least the land gets a little drier. One false move and any of us could be buried alive in this. Okay, she muttered reluctantly. Plucky was right, though. It was too dangerous to go on through this terrain. Perry! Can you scout ahead to find us somewhere to take shelter? Plucky called up to the falcon above them. I could try, though it's hard enough flying straight in this, Perry called back before flying ahead. Plucky and Scarlet waited for the 2 hares and squirrels to catch up, and Perry soon returned, saying he'd found a copse atop a small rise in the land. But he was exhausted, so Scarlet insisted the bird ride on her back. The small thicket of trees, bushes, and shrubs was on an elevated piece of land, which meant it would already be considerably drier than the bog of the scrubland. The climb up would have been easy if it wasn't so wet. The edge was slippery and loose, but they ascended the rise regardless, Plucky tagging at the back to be sure the others were safe before him. Plucky had kept it quiet till now, but since the scar on his leg had forced open again when he fell down the bank of the motorway, it had felt not as good as his other 3 legs. It came to the group's attention when his left back leg slipped in the mud on the hill, but when he tried to hold himself up with his injured front leg, it buckled and Plucky fell. With a sudden gasp of anguish and annoyance, he rolled down the half of the hill he had already climbed, getting covered in the sludge as he went before managing to stop himself. He stopped for a moment to catch his breath lying in the thick mud, half of it matting his fur, but soon realized Scarlet, in a fit of worry, had rushed down to help him. Plucky spoke to her before she could summon a single word. I'm okay, Plucky sounded convincingly as he stood up. Don't lie to me, Plucky, Scarlet said anxiously. Plucky sighed. It's my leg. It's just... He disregarded her worry, but lied to her again when he realized once again his leg was bleeding slightly. Hurting. Are you okay? Scarlet feared. Can you walk? It was just one stumble, Scarlet. Don't worry about me. Plucky reassured her with a smile. It's you who has to be safest. He nuzzled her lightly, though he was covered in the mud, so it just rubbed some of it on her too. Not that she cared. The two foxes ascended the rise again, being a bit more careful this time, and soon joined the others in the shelter of the copse. Before resting, Plucky rolled over on the wet grass to get off the worst of the mud he had attracted. The group took refuge in the copse and intended to remain there until the wet weather surrendered. It took a number of days, but eventually they could finally see the sun again. It was surprising how much they realized they missed the direct sunlight. They waited till the next day to see if the weather was luring them false hope, but it remained bright, and warmer, and drier. Either it's still spring, or it's the end of spring, and summer is coming. The next day, they departed the copse hoping the land was less hazardous, hoping the next stop would be inside White Deer Park. Despite the previous hardship, and the two soon-to-be parent foxes pushing the pace again, hopes were high throughout the group that with every day they traveled, every step they took, they grew closer and closer to White Deer Park. Then, on the 14th day after leaving the town, during another dull, overcast day, the group came to the crest of a hill. And suddenly, a break in the cloud shone a heavenly haze of bright evening sunlight on the view that lay before them. The land that they looked upon was land that Plucky and Dash recognized instantly. The downlands of White Deer Park. They had made it. They were home. Everyone, shout with me! 3 cheers for Plucky 7! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! We did it! Dash muttered, almost in disbelief. We're back! Well, guys, welcome to White Deer Park, Plucky announced proudly. The rabble stood on the mound, gazing upon the promised land of the nature reserve, and before too long, all rushed down the grassy knoll they stood upon, towards the downlands, each of them eager and relieved and overjoyed to finally be here. At the bottom of the hill, the boundary fence of White Deer Park stood before them, the sign placed upon it depicting the clear profile of a white stag. The fence wasn't exactly intimidating. It was a large wire mesh held up with wooden posts, some of which were clearly rotting. The holes in the mesh weren't big enough for them to pass through, but there was a considerable enough gap underneath the fence which was. This was it, though. The end of their journey of a lifetime. The final hurdle. The end of an era. This realization actually made them all hesitate, standing almost nervously before the fence. You first, Perry, Plucky said suddenly. Why me? Perry turned to him, wondering why he was to be the first to enter. Because you deserve it the most, Plucky explained. Around 20 years ago, a toad helped a group of animals to get to this place, along with a fox, a badger, an owl, a snake, a weasel, rabbits, hares, a kestrel, a heron, and a vixen. And now, a falcon, a peregrine falcon, has the honor of leading a fox, a vixen, a hare, 2 hares actually, and 2 squirrels. Perry has done what Toad has done, even though he doesn't know it. Not yet. Everyone gave him a pat on the back. Perry, Perry the peregrine falcon. You kept us in the right direction, Scarlet added. And kept us safe, Dash added too. Each of the group gave him a look of encouragement, and Perry smiled. He felt privileged the rest of them had decided for him to be the first to enter the reserve. The young falcon spread his wings, took a deep inhale, then took off over the fence and landed quickly the other side, and exhaled. The grass really did look greener on the other side. So who's next? Woody asked eagerly. I say free for all, Plucky smiled. Go on. With that, the 2 squirrels leapt up onto and climbed over the fence. They were squirrels after all. And they jumped down and sat next to Perry, waiting on the other side. Dash went next, easily passing through the gap underneath the fence speedily. She looked back at Bolt with an affectionate and gesturing smile. Bolt returned a smile, and too went through the fence, joining his mate on the other side. Plucky and Scarlet remained on the other side of the fence. Ladies first, Plucky smiled at her, gesturing for her to go first. Only if you're right behind me, Scarlet smiled back, and soon squeezed through the fence, Plucky right behind her. They all celebrated, now safe inside the boundaries of White Deer Park, their perilous journey now finally at an end. Although Plucky and Dash soon mentioned that although they were in the nature reserve, they were nowhere near Farthing Land. The sun was setting now, so they decided to stop where they were and continue to Farthing Land in the morning. Except for one of them. No. Oh, right, the gray foxes, the silver foxes, they might be back waiting for Scarlet and Plucky. Well, if that's the case, Plucky, I hope you'll beat Tyron's ass. The celebrations for Plucky were short-lived. All through the last 2 weeks, Plucky had been thinking. He knew for a fact, just because they were now in White Deer Park, it didn't mean he and Scarlet were safe. The boundary fence hadn't stopped Caesar and his troop before, and it wouldn't stop them now, and he knew they would be tracking them. The question was, how close behind were they? He knew that he, Scarlet, and their cubs couldn't live in peace if she was still hunted, and he couldn't let them kill her. Nor could he risk bringing the rest of his family into this feud of his own. He had fought long and hard over the last couple of weeks. But ultimately, there was only one thing he could do. It was in the middle of the night. It was clear and cool, but also still and calm. The silver shine from a crescent moon dominated the deep black sky and cast down upon the surrounding downlands of White Deer Park. Oh, I've missed White Deer Park. I've missed all the other animals. How have Fox and the others been? How's Whisper been? Will she ever get together with Fleet now that Plucky's back? Or will she still need time? Maybe Robber's given her the message already. A salute to our crow friend. Thank you, Robber. Why isn't he in White Deer Park with the others? He should be, with a mate. And their chicks. Plucky and Scarlet were lying next to each other under the cover of a large gorse bush. Scarlet was sound asleep, but Plucky was wide awake. He made sure she was fast asleep before he rose from the ground and looked at his sleeping mate warmly for a time. It was possibly the last time he would ever see her. He moved on, releasing a tear. He came up to where Dash and Bolt were sleeping together and lightly nudged the female hare awake. Dash murmured irritably, having been awoken from her slumber, but Plucky shushed her. She could tell there was obviously something important on his mind, and followed him to a secluded hollow of trees. After making sure they were alone, Dash noticed a pained look on Plucky's face. What is it? She asked nervously. Just so you understand, Plucky began forlornly. You can't tell anyone else this. Nothing was said between them for a moment. Dash was worried, almost terrified what Plucky was going to tell her. Plucky, I don't like it when you get like this. I know, but you're my best friend, and I have to tell you. Why can't you tell Scarlet? She is your mate. Scarlet can never know of this. Plucky interrupted assertively. Okay, Dash replied worriedly. Are you going to tell me? Dash, Plucky began. Obviously, he was reluctant to say it. You know as well as I do that me, Scarlet, and our cubs can't live in safety if she's still being hunted by those grey foxes and her brothers. And I definitely can't let them kill her, and you know why. So, what are you going to do? I'm going to go to the grey foxes and make a deal. My life, for hers. Plucky, no! Dash almost shouted. Plucky shushed her again, and she continued with a stutter. There... She almost started to sob. Plucky, there must be another way. I've been racking through my brain for the last 2 weeks trying to figure out what to do, Dash. There is no other way, Plucky stated hopelessly. But you can't, Dash sobbed. You can't just let them kill you. And I can't let them kill her, Plucky said forcefully, then continuing poignantly. Dash, my cubs need a mother more than they need a father. And I'd rather they grow up without a father, like me, than not grow up at all. He sighed with a hint of depression. And you know I can't tell Scarlet because she will try to stop me. Then, why are you telling me? Because someone has to know. There's nothing I can say that'll change your mind, is there? Dash said, still sobbing. No, not really, Plucky stated sadly, but almost chokily. Clearly Plucky was pessimistic about his chances, but he didn't reveal what his plan was. The fox and the hare stared at each other intently, this possibly being the last time they ever would. Dash then swiftly went to hug Plucky as he sat before her. She cried as he leant his head down to nuzzle her gently, and placed one of his front paws around her back. I'll miss you. Dash wept openly into the fur on Plucky's chest. I know, but I'll always be your friend, Plucky spoke back, almost beginning to weep himself. Just promise me, if I don't come back, help Scarlet look after the cubs, and of course, look after her too. Plucky then tried to push Dash off him slightly, but she wouldn't be moved. He then continued to speak. Take Scarlet to my mother, my grandparents, anyone. Make her feel welcome. Make her feel at home. I promise. I will, Dash stuttered, and then let Plucky go. What are you going to do now? I have no doubt that those grey foxes aren't far behind us. I'm sneaking off now. Then whatever happens, happens, Plucky stated. Okay, Dash stuttered again. Plucky then gave the weeping hare one last nuzzle. Goodbye, Dashy, he muttered affectionately, before turning to briskly wander off into the night. Dash wanted to say something, but she was too inconsolable to muster anything else to say. Goodbye, Plucky, Dash muttered as she witnessed her best friend disappear through the darkness. as if disappearing from her life. Dash stayed in that hollow, dumbfounded with sadness, almost not wanting to believe what had just happened. It was some time before she could compose herself to stop crying and go back to sleep next to Bolt. She hoped that Plucky might come to his senses and come back to her, but she knew in her heart that he wouldn't. She knew him too well. He had made his choice. She dreaded Scarlett's reaction to his disappearance in the morning. But if she was to keep Scarlett from knowing Plucky's sacrifice for her, she couldn't get upset again. She had promised Plucky to take her to the rest of his family, and that's what she intended to do. Why? They just made it back home! But guys, don't lose hope yet. Don't lose hope yet. Plucky has a plan. It said that he had a plan, but we don't know what it is yet, and he doesn't know if it'll work, but it might. It might just involve him tearing Tyrant's throat open and ripping out his veins for Rebel's sake. And for Scarlett's sake, too. So, don't lose hope yet, guys. We still gotta, we still got 7 chapters of this to go. So, until then, I'm the Masked Ranger saying, keep moving forward, remember the oath, and count your lucky stars, because I know we're gonna be thanking them. So, gird up your loins and see you next time. Peace out!